provide me with a single civilization that has ever succeeded under an atheistic paradigm. Also, name me a civilization that has come into being without a preceding binding myth. So this practical question, like, how does the atheist respond to the fact, like implied in this question, that there's never been a successful atheistic paradigm, and that there's never been a successful civilization that hasn't had some kind of like mythological founding?
I suppose that obviously I'm not an anthropologist, so all of these answers are going to be terribly unreliable, and you shouldn't listen to me. But
thanks for watching, everybody. I mean, the first thing I would point out here is that this at least implies that, like, I mean, the way the questioner says, also name me a civilization that has come into being without a preceding binding myth, grants that it might not be true.
Also, preceding is interesting there, right? Because I suppose there might be a sort of chicken egg problem. Something interesting that one of Nietzsche's interesting observations is he thought that we often got causes and effects really confused. So, like, you know, again, come on to existential issues in a sec, but like he thought that it wasn't that nihilistic people, he thought it wasn't that a belief in God it wasn't necessarily that a disbelief in values led to nihilism. It was that people became nihilistic emotionally because of the disorganization of their wills, and then it didn't make sense for them to value things. And he was like, you know, that he had a kind of and he would talk about the active nihilist, who was, you know, simplifying somewhat, but was broadly someone who just thought, well, my will inherently has value. Like, what do you mean my will doesn't have value? I want something. What more can you ask of me? And so, to bring it back to this question, one potential atheist answer is to say, well, yeah, if you get a group of people together in a room of really any significant size, they'll come up with all sorts of like awesome ideas, and it could be that civilization begets a founding myth rather than a founding myth begets a civilization. Like preceding is an interesting word there, because I think clearly these two things are going to be interrelated, right? If I get 100 people together on a desert island, I'm sure they're going to form religion, right, as a thing. And I think that is like the interesting problem for the atheist, is like, well, why does this happen so much? And but regarding whether there's a preceding myth, I think it's probably kind of a mutually interdependent thing there. I mean, can a civilization survive without a shared myth, I think, is an interesting question. It's one that I don't have the answer to.
Yeah, I mean, I doubt it. I'm totally pessimistic about the idea of a nation in any meaningful sense, or certainly a civilization being able to be sort of cohesive and survive and thrive without having something that bonds them together more than like the immediacy of their like day-to-day sense experience, right? And in fact, I think for a lot of atheists, they hypothesize that this is why religion is invented by the mind, by, you know, the collective psychology of mankind and womankind, because of course, like, we sort of need things to tie us together. That's like the whole reason it's invented. And so whether the questioner says, I keep calling them questioners, but a lot of these are just statements, you know, provide me with a single civilization that has ever succeeded upon under an atheistic paradigm. Like, maybe I can't. I mean, an atheistic paradigm, no. As people often conflate the idea of like secularism in politics with atheism in politics, right? Like, an atheistic government might be like the USSR, which, like, people bring that up as a point against atheism all the time. It was not a secular government. A lot of people describe it as secular, even though it was like proactively persecuting religious people, as if that in any way fits into a definition of secular. But it was certainly atheist. Yeah, I can't think of one, and maybe that is because, I'll just grant, it's because like it doesn't work. Right, let's just say, fine, let's just agree with the implication of the question. No civilization can function under atheism. That is as well answered by saying that's because atheism is false, as saying, and that's why, although there is no God, people have to invent one.
Yes, but the other thing is that it doesn't strike me as actually a necessary implication of God exists, that no civilization could survive without a belief in God.
Yeah, sure.
But it is an implication of the atheist explanation there. So, like, in some ways, there's actually a strength of the atheist explanation.
Yeah, I think you might be right there, because God could exist, but if God existed, it would seem like even if people didn't believe in him, he could still, in theory, like, design it so that civilization can still be stable.
At the very least, it doesn't fall out of theism as a kind of obvious implication that no civilization survive without God. But I think this is an interesting question for atheists.
Yes.
Like, are we being terribly irresponsible, Alex, by spreading our horrific, corrosive doctrine?
It's true. It's true, at least to the extent that, I mean, there are studies to suggest that like religious people are like happier, that they have better sex lives, that there's all kinds of things, and so like, there is this case to be made that, like, even if you don't think it's true, like, why would you talk people out of it? Like, to what end? And you can say, oh, because, I value truth and stuff. Like, really? Like, more than you value people's well-being?
Well, I mean,
But like, maybe, but then I don't know. Like, it is a question that does have to be addressed. I mean, I know you sort of say it a bit tongue in cheek, but it's really true. It's worth thinking about.
One interesting implication of basically potentially of an atheist worldview, but also just generally, pretty much any worldview that doesn't have a very, very good metaphysical mirror between human mind and the structure of reality, is that there could be things that are true that are just unbearable. It could be that you discover truths that send you mad. And arguably theism does have a way around that. Like, theism could really neatly sync up truth and utility with the idea of a loving God. It's like, well, truths are useful because the world has been designed benevolently. And that's like, that is an explanatory framework that helps square that circle. I think the very interesting question when you remove that is, well, there could be things that are true that are really not beneficial to believe. But there are also atheistic theories, like there's kind of global pragmatist theories that attempt to tie truth back to utility as a kind of truth is like abstracted away from things that are useful, even if there are individually things that are true that are not useful. So there's some extra work.
I don't think it's controversial to suggest that there could be things which are false but are beneficial for a society to believe in. Well, and so again, considering that we're asking here for questions that atheists cannot answer. Like, okay, it's a confronting question. Well, why hasn't atheism ever worked on a civilizational level? Like, I don't know, let's talk about that. But is it a question that atheists can't answer? I don't think so. I mean, think about the fact that, for example, I don't think that civilizations can survive without all other kinds of myths. Like, for example, like belief in the rule of law. Like belief in your constitution, belief in your like nation's ethic, right? It's very difficult for a nation to survive if there isn't like general like agreement on that. Like if we were still living in like a real monarchy, where like the monarchy was really like the absolute monarch with proper power, the kind of monarchy that I would like to see, and not be complaining about.
The kind of limp monarchy we have at the moment.
Exactly. Then like, okay, like you'd probably need most of the population to sort of believe in the concept of monarchy in order for it to work. Now, I could be sat in that society and be like, well, obviously monarchy is like ridiculous, and it's not true that this person is ordained by God. The chrism oil being rubbed on the chest does not transform this person into some sort of like demigod with like, right to read. None of that's true, right? And people would probably say, okay, well, how are those, Republican societies working out? How's France going? Go and look over there.
That was what people wrote.
Around
the turn of the 18th
exactly,
century.
right? But it wouldn't. All that would tell us is that what we're dealing with here is something like a noble lie. It's like that's an idea from Plato. The idea that there are certain things which are not true but must be believed by a society for it to function. This is not an old idea, and religion just may be one of those things.
Yeah, I suppose there is obviously the argument that, or at least I think people's response to that sort of thing tends to be, well, that's horribly condescending. But I don't think that's, and I don't think it necessarily has to be horribly condescending, because I think you can make it work by saying, well, it's not that people are too limited to not have a God or something like that. You could just say, well, it's just a good organizing principle. It's not that any individual person, is limited in some way. It's just that when you have people at scale, there are all sorts of things that you need to like most people don't need a spreadsheet to organize their lives. But if you have 2,000 people, you probably will need a spreadsheet.
Yeah. And it's a bit like the monarchy thing where, if I said, I don't think the monarchy like comports with reality in the sense that the claims that people make about divine right of kings and stuff aren't true. Okay. So then we abolish the monarchy and like society just falls apart. Right. At best, I would have to say, okay, maybe we should have kept it anyway. It wouldn't prove to me that actually it was all true.
Yes, exactly. This isn't a question atheists can't answer. It might be a question that atheists shouldn't answer.
Yeah, that's another good video idea, actually. Questions atheists should not answer.